There's a truth that many women feel long before they can prove it. When a man begins to drift, he doesn't always walk out the front door. No, sometimes he remains in the room, physically present, while emotionally his soul is tied elsewhere. His words grow quieter, but his silence grows louder. And when that happens, a woman begins to feel like a stranger in her own relationship. She's no longer looking at the same man. She's looking at the shell of who he used to be. Now, let's be honest. Most men won't confess when their heart is no longer with the woman they come home to. They'll hide behind routine, behind tired excuses, behind carefully guarded behavior. Why? Because admitting that his heart belongs to someone else would require confronting the emotional wreckage he's about to cause. So instead, he hides, not just facts, but intentions, connections, emotions. And these aren't random behaviors. They are precise psychological signs that something sacred has shifted. If you pay close attention, you'll see it, you'll feel it, you'll know it. And today, I want to walk you through 5 of those hidden behaviors. Not just so you can see him clearly, but so you can see yourself more clearly too. When a man begins to emotionally detach from the woman he's with, he doesn't usually announce it. He doesn't hold a press conference. He doesn't sit you down at the kitchen table and say, "Hey, just so you know, I've started investing my heart in someone else." No, it's far more subtle than that. It begins quietly, with a slow withdrawal from the kind of emotional transparency that once made your bond feel safe, honest, and real. He stops sharing how he's feeling, what he's thinking, what he's dreaming about, and what's keeping him up at night. But this isn't because he suddenly lost the need to express himself. It's because those expressions have found a new destination, someone else who listens without judgment, who reflects his thoughts back to him with warmth, who maybe makes him feel admired or respected in a way he feels is missing at home. So he starts conserving his emotional energy with you, reserving the deeper parts of his heart for conversations elsewhere. You might ask how his day went, and he'll give you the surface-level answer. Fine. But the truth is, that's not the full story. He had an argument with his boss. He's uncertain about a big decision. He felt vulnerable about something someone said, but you won't hear about any of it because he's already given those pieces of himself to another woman, emotionally investing in a connection that doesn't carry the same weight of commitment, history, or responsibility. And this is the part that's so painful. You begin to feel like an outsider in your own relationship, not because he's yelling or pulling away in loud, obvious ways, but because he's slowly building emotional walls you weren't invited behind. The man who once opened up to you like a book now guards every page. He might still show up physically, going through the motions, sharing a meal, sitting beside you on the couch, responding to your texts. But something sacred has shifted. There's a coldness in his warmth, a distance in his nearness. You can sense the effort it takes for him to remain present. The emotional intimacy you used to share has been rerouted. And what's worse is that when you bring it up, when you say things like, "I feel like you're not really here with me anymore," he might respond with confusion or denial. He might say you're imagining things or being too sensitive. But deep down, you know, you're not crazy. You're not paranoid. You're perceptive. You're picking up on subtle but undeniable changes that indicate his heart is not fully with you anymore. This emotional shift is one of the first and most devastating things a man hides when his affection starts to turn toward another woman. Because even if he hasn't crossed a physical boundary, his loyalty, the very essence of commitment, has begun to erode. And unless he confronts that truth within himself, he'll keep hiding it from you, pretending nothing has changed while you slowly lose your place in the relationship. That's the torment of emotional betrayal. It's invisible until it's undeniable. Secrecy isn't always a sign of guilt, but sudden secrecy is. And when a man begins to develop feelings for another woman, one of the first things he instinctively protects is access. Access to his digital world, access to his schedule, and most importantly, access to the time he spends away from you. He doesn't need to say the words, "I'm hiding something," because his behavior begins to say it for him. You'll notice it in the way he holds his phone more tightly, the way he quickly swipes notifications away, or the way he suddenly adds a password to his device when there was none before. These changes may seem small at first, even innocent, but they're signals, deliberate steps to guard something he doesn't want you to see. And here's where it becomes clear. When a man's heart is shifting toward another woman, his need for privacy grows in proportion to his emotional investment. He becomes territorial over his messages, his call history, even his social media, not because he's doing something explicitly wrong, but because emotionally, he's already begun to cross lines he doesn't want you questioning. The same goes for his schedule. Time he used to spend freely with you now becomes fragmented, ambiguous. He suddenly has late meetings or work trips that he doesn't talk about in detail. His routines shift, but he offers no real explanation. If you ask questions, he gets defensive, not because he's necessarily lying, but because he's now living a double reality that he's trying to manage. And managing two emotional connections, one public and one private, requires space, secrecy, and silence. So he creates it little by little. He may start spending more time out of the house, but you're never quite sure where he is. He might take longer to reply to your messages, and when he does, his responses lack warmth or depth. What used to feel like open communication now feels like dodging and deflection, and all the while, he tells you not to worry. You're overthinking. It's just a busy season. But in your gut, his patterns aren't random. They're reactions to an emotional shift he hasn't admitted to yet. And here's what makes this behavior so manipulative. He keeps just enough consistency to make you doubt your intuition. He doesn't disappear entirely. He still smiles sometimes, still asks how you're doing, still shows up to family functions, but he does the bare minimum to keep up the appearance of connection, all while guarding the emotional life he's begun to build outside of you. That's the key. When a man's heart is with another woman, he protects that connection. And the easiest way to protect it is by closing the door on transparency. It's not just about cheating. It's about compartmentalizing, about creating a separate world where his desires, his attention, and his affections can live without interruption, especially from the woman who used to be the cantor of his life. So if you're feeling excluded, kept in the dark, or confused by his sudden need for privacy, understand that these are not coincidences. They are calculated changes. They are walls going up, not because he's trying to protect you, but because he's trying to protect what he doesn't want you to find. And until that's acknowledged, your relationship will be built on a lie, one that grows every time you ignore the voice inside you that already knows the truth. Affection isn't just about physical closeness. It's about emotional expression through touch, presence, and effort. When a man is truly invested in a woman, his affection toward her is effortless, genuine, and frequent. It becomes a natural extension of his feelings, holding her hand without thinking, pulling her close during quiet moments, kissing her on the forehead as a silent declaration of love. These are not performances. They are the small gestures that reveal where his heart lives. But when that heart starts shifting towards someone else, those same gestures begin to disappear. Not all at once, but slowly, subtly, until one day you realize the warmth you once relied on has turned cold. And when you bring it up, when you say, "You don't hold me like you used to," he might dismiss it. He might say, "I've just been tired," or "It's nothing." But it's not nothing. It's a sign that something inside him is being reserved for someone else. The most painful part of this is not just the loss of physical touch, but the emotional absence behind it. You can lie next to him and still feel alone. He can wrap his arms around you, and you'll still sense the tension in his body, the restraint in his grip. What once was instinctive now feels forced, and you begin to question not just his love, but your own worth. You start to wonder, did I do something wrong? But this isn't about your inadequacy. It's about a man who's already begun to redirect his emotional energy elsewhere and, as a result, has withdrawn from the kind of affection that once came naturally to him. It's important to understand that affection is not just physical, it's also verbal, emotional, and spiritual. A man who's emotionally present compliments you without thinking, notices the little things, and finds joy in making you feel seen. But when that joy fades, when his compliments stop, when his eyes no longer light up when you walk in the room, it's because his affection is no longer rooted in the relationship you share. It's drifting, and in many cases, it's already landed somewhere else. You'll start noticing how he interacts with others, how his tone of voice changes when he talks about someone else, how he lights up when he's not with you. These are not just signs of boredom or stress. They are emotional redirections. His affection is being awakened by someone who now holds the key to his inner world. This doesn't mean he hates you. It doesn't mean he wishes you harm. But it does mean that the center of his emotional gravity has shifted. And when that happens, affection toward you becomes a chore, something he does to maintain appearances, not something he feels compelled to give. You begin to sense that you're no longer the place he goes to find peace, but the person he avoids to prevent confrontation. That's when affection dies, not with one blow, but through a series of quiet withdrawals. No more late-night cuddles, no more spontaneous hugs, no more random "I love you" texts, just silence, cold, uncomfortable silence where warmth used to live. And that silence is loud. It speaks volumes about what he's no longer saying, no longer showing, and no longer feeling. When a man stops being affectionate, it's not always because something is broken in the relationship. It's often because something new is blooming elsewhere. And until he faces that reality, you'll be left starving for affection he's already begun to give away. When a man begins to hide his inner world, it's one of the clearest signs that his emotional connection to you is fading. And yet, it's also one of the most easily overlooked. Not because it isn't obvious, but because it unfolds so gradually, so quietly, that you almost don't notice it until it's too late. One day, he just stops telling you things. The conversations that once lasted for hours now last for minutes. The topics that used to matter, his fears, his dreams, his struggles, are no longer shared. He becomes harder to read, harder to reach, harder to feel close to. And when you ask him what's wrong, he simply says, "I'm fine." But deep down, you know he's not. You just don't know why he won't let you in anymore. What you may not realize is that someone else already has that access. Someone else is hearing the stories, the insecurities, the jokes, the frustrations. Someone else is witnessing the side of him that you used to know intimately. It's not that he's stopped expressing himself, it's that he's stopped expressing himself to you. This kind of emotional distancing is especially painful because it doesn't feel like betrayal at first. It feels like confusion. You try to convince yourself that maybe he's just going through a tough time, maybe he's overwhelmed, maybe he needs space. And while those things might be true on the surface, they don't explain why his emotional openness has become so selectively withdrawn. It's not that he's become emotionally closed, it's that he's become emotionally redirected. You're no longer the person he processes life with. And that's not just a behavioral change, it's a relational shift. When a man stops confiding in you, he's not just protecting his thoughts, he's protecting a new emotional connection that he doesn't want to compromise. He's guarding it carefully because he knows that if he were to speak freely to you again, he might risk revealing too much about where his heart actually is. This withdrawal doesn't just damage your connection, it also deeply undermines your self-trust. You begin to feel like a stranger in your own relationship. You sense the gap growing, but every time you reach across it, you come up empty-handed. He no longer shares how his day went, no longer tells you what excites him, what troubles him, what he's hoping for or afraid of. You might still talk, but it's surface level. Weather, bills, errands, logistics. the soul of the relationship goes missing, and with it, so does your sense of closeness. You're left navigating a relationship that feels more like a roommate dynamic than a romantic partnership. And what makes this even harder is that he might still deny it. If you ask him directly, he may say, "I'm just tired," or "You're making a big deal out of nothing." He may not even be fully conscious of what he's doing, but make no mistake, the decision to hide his inner world from you is not just emotional laziness, it's emotional self-preservation. He's building a safe emotional home somewhere else, and to do that, he must emotionally evict you without making it obvious. That's the cruelty of it. You're slowly being pushed out of the most sacred part of his life, and yet no one ever said goodbye. It just faded. And unless he's willing to confront that truth within himself, you'll keep trying to reconnect with someone who's already let go internally. His silence is not empty. It's full of everything he's telling her instead of you. There's a quiet kind of devastation that occurs when you begin to realize you're no longer part of his future. Not because he told you directly, not because there was some explosive argument or final goodbye, but because the way he talks about tomorrow no longer includes you. The subtle cues begin to pile up. He stops making plans that involve the two of you. He no longer talks about that trip you both dreamed of taking. The long-term goals you once discussed now seem irrelevant or forgotten, and when you bring it up, when you ask where he sees things going, he answers vaguely, uncertainly, as if suddenly unsure about everything. But he's not unsure about everything, he's just unsure about you, because deep down he's already started imagining a future with someone else. And that internal shift changes everything, even if he hasn't physically acted on it yet. When a man emotionally transfers his loyalty to another woman, he begins to construct a mental image of his life that excludes you. It's not always deliberate or malicious. It can even feel unintentional to him, but it's real. The future he once talked about building with you now feels like a script he's quietly stepping away from. And to do that without confrontation, he begins to speak in generalities. He uses phrases like, "I just need space," or "I don't know what I want anymore." But those phrases aren't neutral, they're protective. They allow him to emotionally retreat while still keeping the door open just wide enough to avoid guilt. Meanwhile, you're left confused, holding on to hopes that he no longer truly shares. You begin to notice how he lights up when he talks about other people, other ideas, other places, but there's a distance when he speaks about you or when you bring up commitment. He might still say things like, "We'll figure it out," or "Let's see what happens." But those words lack the conviction they once carried. And this shift is more than emotional. It starts to show up in behavior. He doesn't prioritize joint decisions. He avoids making financial or lifestyle commitments with you. He acts as if everything is temporary, even the relationship itself. And here's the most painful part. It leaves you in limbo. You're not broken up, but you're not building anything either. You're just there, trying to hold space in a life where your presence is no longer being considered. You may try harder. You may start making plans yourself, hoping to reignite the connection, but he remains distant, non-committal, because while you're trying to bring him back into the vision you once shared, he's already started painting a different picture in his mind, one where another woman is the companion, the muse, the emotional partner. And it's not always because she's better. It's not even because he's sure of her. It's because something in him detached from you quietly, gradually, and now the idea of moving forward with you feels like a story he's already outgrown. This is what makes it so difficult to confront. He hasn't left, he hasn't confessed, but he's no longer reaching forward with you, and love that doesn't grow forward begins to decay. A man who hides his future plans is a man who's protecting a version of life he no longer sees you in. And if he won't be honest about that, you'll be left waiting for a future that only exists in your mind, while his heart is already on its way somewhere else.